Imagine a room. Small. Messy. Smelling of stale caffeine and unwashed laundry. Inside sits a 19-year-old kid. He's not a hero. He's a pariah. He just built a website that crashed the Harvard server in 4 hours. He's facing expulsion. His girlfriend dumped him. The entire female population of the campus wants his head on a spike. Fast forward 20 years. That same socially awkward kid is worth $100 billion. He owns the digital real estate where 3 billion people live, breathe, and argue. He can move markets with a status update. He can influence elections with an algorithm. But to get there, he had to burn every bridge he ever crossed. He had to betray his best friend. He had to dodge lawsuits that would have buried any other human being. This isn't a story about a cool startup. It's a story about obsession, digital warfare, and the high price of playing God. This is the story of how Mark Zuckerberg almost lost everything before he even had it. It's 2003. Harvard University. The most prestigious institution on the planet. A place designed for the elite, the polished, and the powerful. Mark Zuckerberg didn't fit the mold. He wasn't the star athlete. He wasn't the legacy student with a trust fund and a future in the Senate. He was the coder. In the hierarchy of Harvard, Mark was an invisible man. He spent his nights in a gray hoodie, staring at a CRT monitor until his eyes bled and his fingers went numb. He wasn't looking for a high-paying job at McKinsey. He wasn't looking for a 4.0 GPA. He was looking for relevance. He wanted to build something that people couldn't ignore. Then came Facemash. In one night of drunken bitterness, fueled by a breakup and a desire to lash out, he hacked into Harvard's protected house directories. He stole the private ID photos of every student on campus. He wrote a script to compare them side by side, asking the world to rate them, who is hotter. It was cruel. It was brilliant. It was highly illegal. The university shut him down in hours. The administrative board hauled him in, threatening to kick him out. He was public enemy number 1. But as he sat in that disciplinary hearing, he noticed something the deans didn't. People were obsessed. Despite the outrage, the traffic was off the charts. In the wreckage of that scandal, Mark realized a terrifying truth about human nature. People didn't want to look at celebrities or the news. They wanted to look at each other. They wanted to judge, to compare, and to see who was in and who was out. The voyeuristic urge was the most powerful engine in the world. But as Mark began coding his next project, he didn't realize he was already being watched. 3 seniors, elite rowers with a massive idea, were about to hand him the keys to a kingdom, an illegal nightmare that would last a decade. Enter the Winklevoss twins. Tyler and Cameron. 6'5", Olympic athletes, perfectly chiseled legacies. They had an idea called Harvard Connection. They had the money and the status, but they lacked the one thing that mattered: they couldn't write a single line of code. They needed a worker bee. They chose Mark. Mark said yes. He shook their hands. But while he was supposed to be building their dream, he was secretly constructing his own. Picture this: it's 2 a.m. in Kirkland House, room H33. The air is thick with the smell of Red Bull and stale pizza. Mark is receiving emails from the twins. He's receiving texts asking for updates. He ignores them all. He leaves them on read for weeks. In the dark of that room, he was writing the DNA of what would become the Facebook. He didn't have a business plan. He didn't have a bank account. He didn't even have a lawyer. He had a vision. He wanted to map the entire social graph of the human race. He wanted to take the physical world and digitize it, node by node. When he finally hit launch on February 4, 2004, he didn't pop champagne. He didn't even smile. He just sat there and watched the numbers climb. 10 users. 50, 500. 1,000. Within weeks, it spread like a digital virus. First Harvard. Then Yale. Then Stanford. The cool factor was intoxicating. Mark dropped out of Harvard. He packed his bags and moved to Silicon Valley, the land of giants. He was 19 years old, living in a house with 10 other coders, sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor in a room filled with humming servers. They were broke. They were being chased by the Winklevoss lawyers, who were screaming theft. And then, the sharks started to circle. 2005, the turning point. The world was starting to notice that this wasn't just a college fad. It was a gold mine. Viacom, the media giant, walked into the room and offered Mark $75 million. Think about that. You're 20 years old. You're still wearing the same t-shirt you wore 3 days ago. You've never seen $1 million in your life. Most people would have taken the money and ran. Mark said no. A year later, the pressure intensified. Yahoo walked through the door with a check for $1 billion. This was the moment of absolute crisis. His investors were screaming at him to sign. His board of directors was threatening to fire him and find a grown-up CEO who would take the deal. His own management team was in open revolt, believing Mark was a delusional kid who was about to blow the biggest payday in history. They thought he was insane. They thought the social media bubble would burst and they'd all end up with nothing but memories of a failed website. This was the near-death moment. If Mark was wrong, he would be the punchline of every business joke for the next century. He would be the kid who turned down $1 billion to become a footnote. Could have been. But Mark didn't see a website. He saw an empire. He believed that if he sold, the vision would die in the hands of a corporation that didn't understand the social graph. He stayed. He fought. He fired the people who doubted him. But the cost was his soul. To maintain total control, he had to perform a clinical execution. He had to squeeze out his co-founder and only real friend, Eduardo Saverin. Under the guise of a new investment deal, Mark signed a document that diluted Eduardo's shares to virtually zero while keeping his own intact. It was cold. It was calculated. It was a dark business masterclass. He chose the company over his friend. He chose the future over his past. Mark survived the board and the lawsuits, but he was about to face a new enemy. The very thing he created was starting to change the way the human brain works, and the world was starting to look back at him with fear. Today, the dorm room is gone. The $0 bank account is a joke of the past. Mark Zuckerberg is no longer the underdog. He is the architect. But look closer. Look at the congressional hearings. Look at the scandals over privacy, data, and mental health. He built the world's greatest tool for connection, but in doing so, he created the world's greatest tool for division. The lesson? In business, speed is everything. Move fast and break things. That was his motto. But Mark forgot one thing: when you move that fast, you don't just break software. You break people. You break friendships. You break the truth. He won the game. He owns the world. But as he sits in his high-tech fortress, surrounded by security and lawyers, you have to wonder. If he could go back to that dorm room in 2004, knowing the chaos he would unleash, would he still hit launch?